Well, Rob, Tom Brady, who we know this year is going to call games for Fox Sports, he was doing a media tour recently, and he spoke with Yahoo Sports, and he was talking naturally about quarterbacking, and he says that it's not as good as it used to be. Here's a quote. He talked a lot about it. I can't read everything, obviously, but he said, I think the quarterbacking has gone backwards a little bit in the NFL. I don't think it's improved. I don't think the teaching's improved. I think maybe the physical fundamentals might be a little bit improved because there's better information out there for quarterbacks to study on mechanics. But I don't think quarterbacks really are field generals right now like they used to be. He said there's, coaches have a lot of control. He even says that I think now there's this try to control element from the sideline between the coaches where they want to have control, and they're not teaching and developing the players with the right tools so that they can go out on the field and make their own decisions that are best suited for the team. When I looked at Peyton Manning, he was a guy that I looked up to because he had ultimate control. And I think the game's regressed in a little bit of that way based on what's happened in high school football, college football, and then the NFL is getting a much lesser developed quarterback at this point. Interesting. What are your thoughts?
I don't know. I mean, kind of a mixed bag. I mean, I think do we have examples? Who is he talking about?
Yeah, look.
You know what I mean, Chris? Like, seriously,
I don't think he's talking about anybody in particular. I think he's talking about just the general state of quarterbacking, and obviously he would know. We've talked about, Rob, how it's easier for quarterbacks today. The rules are different. They can't get hit like they used to get hit.
Go ask Joe Montana whether or not he'd want to play in this football, right. Chris. I mean, my God, he was brutalized when he played against the New York Football Giants. Yep. Brutalized. Yep.
And the receivers can't get hit like they used to either, particularly going across the middle, right?
You didn't go across the middle, Chris.
You knew if you did, you might get decapitated.
Exactly.
So that we've talked about it. That's why you look at the numbers of the legends. We always say it. We kind of have to, put it out there. Well, hold up. It was a different game back then. So when you see that this Hall of Famer only completed 50% of his passes or had almost as many interceptions as touchdowns in his career, you got to understand it was a different game. And, Rob, I think Brady is a great example of how much easier it is to play quarterback today, Rob, because some of his numbers in his 40s, and obviously he was, extraordinarily great in terms of his longevity.
I mean,
right?
But you're right.
He's Rob. He had 6 years in his 40s. At 43 years old, he threw 40 touchdowns and 12 interceptions and 4,600 yards. At 44, he threw for 5,300 yards, 43 touchdowns, and 12 interceptions. That was the year I thought he should have been MVP when it went to Rodgers. But, Rob, a guy in his mid-40s, and again, we understand Brady took care of himself and all that, Rob, but his numbers weren't that great outside of, the year he had Randy Moss. He wasn't putting up those types of numbers in his prime.
No, because the game changed, and he was protected.
Yep. All he had to do is stand back there.
If they touched him, Chris, apart. You know what I mean? Yep. Yeah. It was definitely an advantage, 100%. And it doesn't mean that he couldn't play or he had to still deliver the ball and do all that stuff.
And stuff.
Exactly. Yeah. But there was a difference that allowed him. Had he been popped a few times early in his 40s, he wouldn't have been playing.
Well, if it had been say early in his career, I don't know that he would have been playing late into his 40s. If in his 40s you could still get hit the way you could earlier in his career. Rob, we know the year he had Randy Moss, or the big year he had Moss. He threw for 50 touchdowns. That was his career high. His next two highest seasons as far as total touch or passing touchdowns when he was 43 and 44 years old.
Right.
But his career high in terms of yardage was when he was 44 years old. Now, he threw it a ton that year. Remember, he threw over 700 balls his last 2 years. But still, that is exhibit A to how it's easier for the quarterbacks, much easier today than it used to be.
Yeah. I think there's no ifs, ands, or buts. We've talked about how it's easier to score in the NBA. It's easier to play quarterback. We could go on and on and on about stuff. Chris, I think, and baseball's different.
Remember a few years ago, they thought the ball, it was the ball might be juiced or whatever.
A little tighter, wound up a little tight. But here's the difference too, Chris, I think. There was a time when, you didn't dig in or you didn't have to worry about getting hit or thrown at or thrown close to.
Right.
Like they used to. They used to make you a little afraid. You better not dig in there. You better be ready to dance in that box. And we don't see that they don't play that kind of baseball anymore.
No, that's true. That's true. As far as the other stuff he said, right, it is hard to critique. There are coaches, Kyle Shanahan, Rob, that do kind of want to control everything from the sidelines, right? And so Brock Purdy just kind of has to paint by numbers. Now, you still got to be good, obviously, to do that, but the coach is kind of, to some degree, doing the thinking for you. You have to have the instincts. You have to make the decisions on the fly, obviously, on the field, but the coach is kind of, doing a lot of thinking for you and obviously calling plays nowadays. But, just, where you're throwing the ball, if that guy's open, your first option and stuff. So I think that could be fair. It'd be good if the listeners out there, any quarterback gurus or experts that want to call in and talk about this and maybe dig a little deeper on what Brady is saying. But, I don't know, Rob. I also thinking he brought up the high school and college. I do think quarterbacks are getting a lot more work, though, than they used to.
Well,
they're playing 7-7, right?
And they got all the football camps and the Manning quarterback camp and all these other things where they're specializing just in quarterbacks,
Right. So I would think in a lot of ways they might be more prepared.
I would think so. They work on your footwork, Chris, all kinds of stuff. That I'm not so sure that was, you just played. You know what I mean? You just played.
Yeah. You see guys, even when you watch some high school games, the top teams, you'll see the quarterbacks kind of calling the game to some degree at the line of scrimmage, like you used to see Peyton Manning do. That's trickled down to the lower levels now. And, even high school, the top high school quarterbacks are doing some of that stuff. So I don't know. It's interesting. He won't, Rob, there's no way he won't be able to be that pessimistic calling the games, if indeed that's how he feels about it. You know what I'm saying?
It's going to be interesting to see because Tom Brady was a wet blanket as a player or a quote. And it'll be interesting, Chris, to see if he works into this role, if he has something to say, you know what I mean? Like, I'm really curious.
Well, he's going through, they're training hard. And
and nobody's saying you got to rip people, but you got to be insightful. You got to be able to point out some stuff. You don't need to be Tony Romo. I don't want that.
Well, remember, Romo took the booth by storm. But now people kind of, it feels like it's gotten a little stale.
Right.
People not as high on him as they used to.
And what happens too, Chris, is you keep doing that. And then at first, he had the playbook at first. And then he started, they weren't going his way. You know what I mean? And you don't sound as smart. I'll still remember, who was the quarterback that came in for Patrick Mahomes, Chris, in that playoff game?
Was that Chad?
Chad Henning.
Henning, yeah.
Chad Henning, I'm sorry, from Michigan.
Right.
And I remember that. You remember that was a big play. They were in their own territory. The ball was in their own territory. And I remember watching and seeing, Tony Romo goes, there's no way that they're going to throw this ball here. You know what I mean? Like,
right,
no way. Like, it just it doesn't make sense. There's no way they're going to do it, blah, blah, blah. And guess what they did? They threw it and got a first down. You know, they're like, they're just at the line, just trying to draw them off or just trying to. And it wasn't the case.
It'll be interesting. It will be interesting how good he is. Obviously, I hope he's really good. And they, like I said, they're going through the training, and he's getting himself ready. Because I'll say this, and I don't know that this could even be the case with him, because of the training and stuff. But Rob, there were athletes. I bet you feel the same way. There were guys that when they played, they were articulate, they were handsome, popular, and you thought, oh man, he's gonna be great on TV. And they just were too soft-spoken or didn't have enough energy. And, it didn't have that it factor. Right? I don't know that anybody would have predicted Barkley. Now, we know he had the great personality and stuff, but I don't think anybody would have predicted he would have become what he did.
And in order to do that, too, he lost some friends along the way. You know what I mean? He had to...
Well, like Perks upset some people.
Yeah, but that's if you really want to do the job right, Chris, you're going to have some of that. Because if you're flinching on everything and everything hinges on you being cool with somebody or saying something, it's going to be a long day at the office. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and for him,
you're not there enough to rip everybody, but if you can't give
a role,
if you can't give an honest opinion, you know what I mean? Because you're afraid someone's going to say something the next time you see him. It puts you in a tough spot.
You gotta keep it real. But like I said, it's not like he's going to be debating, on anything like that. But
no.
Still, you're going to have to call it like you see it.